This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome Scott Cutler, who's the Executive Vice President with the NYSE Euronext. And as you can see, this is our holiday show. And anybody that has ever accused us of not being creative, I just want you to look and see that we've got snow in the background, we've got some decorations. And Scott, this and the next show are two of probably our most favorite shows, because in this show, in the holiday show, we get a chance to look back at the issues of 2012, and then next week we'll have a chance to look forward into 2013. So typically when we have this session, we like to, and first of all, I've got to ask the crew if they can start to cut down on the snow, because if we're getting dizzy watching it, I can't imagine how the audience feels on that, watching it on the computer. But so how we traditionally have done this is we've sort of gone back and forth, and I'll let you start this with, again, the looking back. What was significant to you about 2012?
I'm not going to start the look back with the same of what we talked about in terms of the look forward for 2012, but my biggest trend in terms of things that we saw happen last year would be what I would call regulation constipation. And that is more of an impact on businesses, an impact on strategy. And some of this was called out in a recent survey we did with a lot of our listed companies, was that a lot of the lack of ability that companies had in terms of deploying capital was the regulatory uncertainty in the environment. And I think if you look at where we've been post-financial crisis, we still have 2/3 of the 400 to 500 rulemakings of Dodd-Frank that have not yet been implemented. We have healthcare reform that's really only just beginning now, obviously reinforced with Obama's re-election. But many of those reforms aren't even expected to kick in until 2014. Now both parties have called for an overhaul of the federal tax code, and then you've got regulations around some of the things around foreign corrupt practice, FCPA, new whistleblower regulations. So you've seen a tremendous amount of regulatory uncertainty that I believe is actually reflected in a lot of the reluctance that many companies have to deploying capital, making capital investment decisions, and that constipation I expect to continue actually into the next few years.
We know that the job that has created for the director has put many directors in the position of certainly cutting back their board seats, or in the sense of the CEO, either they voluntarily said, I can't take more than one board seat, or the board has asked them not to take more than one board seat. So the role of the director, mostly attributable to what you're talking about, has really changed in 2012. Really saw the load sort of pile on.
Yeah. So what's your top pick?
Well, I'm going to pick, one of the things that we called when we looked out, or when I looked out in 2012, was that this was the year of shareholder communications. And I think that has proven itself to at least be one of the major issues. We've seen the proliferation of say on pay, and just the need to make sure that what typically used to be a process of communicating with shareholders just around the proxy season is now turned into a full-time responsibility year-round. So investor relations, corporate secretaries, the board, everybody has had to work with this. And as I just referenced, say on pay is probably the bellwether to how that is. And what was really significant this year is that there were companies that passed their say on pay with flying colors in year one that actually failed the vote in year two because their bottom line changed, their performance changed, and it changed. While their plan looked okay in year one, it didn't in year two. They weren't prepared. They didn't have that communication that was going on for the whole year, so they had to ramp up very quickly. And honestly, some couldn't ramp up fast enough to get out to the shareholders to get the vote in, even though their plan sort of made sense. They didn't have the opportunity to communicate that. So I think that 2012 really was very significant on changing the sort of the process for engaging with shareholders on a regular basis.
I would agree with you, and it was that pivotal year where discussions in the boardroom and that relationship that typically management or investor relations had with shareholders didn't transition, but was now reflected or required to be reflected at the board level. I would agree. My number two is actually, I think 2012 was the beginning of a new era. And this was the new era of social media. This year, mobile devices surpassed the human population. We have nearly 2 billion people in the world connected in social media platforms. We have over 1 billion tweets happening now every couple of days. And so the proliferation of technology and social media is truly changing the way companies are organized, structured, and I see it in really 4 big areas. The first really being customer engagement. This is really one of the first years, and obviously with the spectacular demise of the Facebook IPO, that being set aside, that the amount of reach that large brands are having with customers and engaging with customers in unique and differentiated ways is real now. There's tremendous implications in terms of the changes in workforce dynamics, access to mobile devices, what that means in terms of security, the type of changes that result from employees having access to all of these media platforms in the workforce. Employee access has also changed dramatically, which clearly has security implications. But a corporation used to control that one mobile device in your computer and PC, and now individuals are carrying around with them communication devices to communicate with the masses. It's a challenge and an opportunity. And probably the fourth thing is really what you've seen happen is just the way that corporations communicate has changed. So you've had instances where directors or management teams have said the wrong things in social media platforms. But since it's such a powerful medium, people are also starting to learn what are the governors in terms of how it should be used, how it can be used for both positive and for negative. And so I think that's just a trend that impacted everybody, but I think from a corporate governance perspective, it's certainly now this piece of technology that's a powerful tool both ways.
I think it's an excellent point, and when we relate it back to our audience, to our board members, you don't have to be a tweeter. I mean, you don't have to use Twitter, and you don't have to do that. But as a board member, you better understand the ramifications. Right. Of what social media means to your board and the processes that you're going to manage it, whether it's employee or it's on the outside. Perfect example is, in the old days, if the CEO was traveling somewhere, it's rare that something happened between when they got on the plane and when they landed, or if they did, they always had time to give a response. Today, you could well be, if your plane for whatever reason doesn't have access, you could take off and land and find out that your whole company has had a major event, and you that quickly need to be prepared to be able to respond to that. And that has just changed. When you said it in the front of a new era, that has just changed the way people do business.
It's a real-time media cycle, it's a real-time information cycle, and it's a real-time connection to companies and individuals. It's 24/7.
And directors have to, as much as, again, they may not tweet. They better understand, because it started as sort of what are you doing? But when business realized the potential of that kind of reach, it changed significantly how things are communicated out. So it's a big issue.
All right, what's your second?
Mine, I can't finish the year without talking about diversity, in the boardroom. And it's a topic that is sensitive. People have called us tree huggers for dealing with the topic. And there are people out there that are pressing for diversity for the wrong reasons. What we wanted to do at the beginning of the year was take a look at, the significance. And when we did our roundtables, we didn't find any empirical evidence that couldn't be sort of attacked on why somebody should look at diversity. But there's just a common sense element about that you need a board that reflects the markets that you serve to be effective, in those markets. And the one thing that we did, because we ran that large event called Moving the Needle, and we had in some 250 very viable, diverse candidates and nominating chairs in as well. And we wanted to debunk the theory that there weren't qualified candidates to fit these positions. These people were very, very qualified, okay? And if somebody wants to build a little bit of diversity on their board, there are people that are very, very qualified to do that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. I think one of the things that's maybe a lead-in into the 2013 would probably be my third trend for just very brief mention is just the impact on the corporate strategy side. I talked about last year the importance of that focus on strategy, but I think it plays itself out maybe somewhat related to my first point, which is this last year there's a high degree of just conservatism in the marketplace, where you just didn't want to make any decisions. Corporate balance sheets are very strong as a result, and I think that's going to position a lot of companies for opportunities going forward. And so what might have been conservative this last year maybe presents opportunities for 13.
Well, and we are going to talk about corporate strategy in the next session, because I think it really is something that is the 2013 need and trend. So Scott, I can't, again, thank you enough for your participation as our co-host for this year. And I'd like to take this opportunity just to thank some other people, knowing this is our last show of the year. First and foremost, we want to thank the folks at the Center for Audit Quality, Cindy Fernelli and her team. It gave us the opportunity to both produce this show and bring it to you on a weekly basis, and without their help we certainly couldn't do that. Same is true for our other sponsor, Grant Thornton. We're happy to have them as well, and they both contribute good information as far as what type of programming that we do. As everybody knows, we have an affiliation with the National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals. They equally contribute to the show. We want to thank them and again, hope that they have a good year going forward. I can't help but thank our crew. And I know you never get to see them on air. And they are the ones that magically can produce this snow like you're seeing right now. So I want to thank them for the great job that they have done. Scott, again, I want to thank you. I know your travel schedule doesn't let you join us all the time, but you have a savvy understanding of the boardroom. Someday we'll make a company a great director. Obviously our hands are tied right now being at the exchange, but I think someday somebody's going to get a great director, and I'll look forward to having you on a board someday. And then finally, I want to thank you, the audience, because without your participation, your comments, whether I'm in the airport or walking around town, I just want to tell you that it's always delightful and refreshing to hear your comments. Scott and I try and look at this and how we can improve. People tell us that we need to be more lively, and we're trying to do that. You got snow and decorations in the background. At least that's a start for us. But we sincerely want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy new year. We'll look forward to seeing you on our what we call our futuristic show when we look forward. But with that, we hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll look forward to seeing you next year when we take a look at issues that will help you be a better board member and a better committee member. We'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partners, the Center for Audit Quality and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.